Hello everyone, welcome back to another week of the Backlog Bunker. So for a little bit of context, I was going to originally make a Backlog Bunker episode about demos that I played, because I had a lot of demos downloaded on my PS5 and on my PC that I was just going to do, play a bunch of them and then make a Backlog Bunker about all of those. But a lot of those demos ended up being either really boring or really bad, so I ended up not really having much to say about them, especially not anything I wanted to put in the Backlog Bunker. So I ended up kind of scrapping the whole demo day idea, but there was one game that I played that I did really want to talk about, and it's more relevant to talk about it now, because it actually came out, and that game is Wander Stars. Back when I originally wrote my notes on Wander Stars, it was April, and the game didn't have a release date yet, so that's why it sat on the topic for so long. But now that the game is actually out, I think it's time to talk about it, because there are a lot of really interesting things about this game that I want to talk about. And granted, a lot of my thoughts might be outdated, because, again, I played a demo from before the game had a release date, so not gonna say that anything that I talk about here, positive or negative, will apply to the final game, but for the most part, in terms of a concept and premise, I think it should be accurate. And speaking of the concept and premise, it's a turn-based RPG where all of your attacks are words. Attacking words, modifiers for those attacks, things like that. But every word that you use has a cooldown, so you can't use the same combos over and over again. And enemies can be befriended, so if you get them within a certain health range, then you can just end the fight right there. And you're rewarded for doing so, because the better you do at the fight, the more of a chance you have to get, new attacking moves, and if you befriend an enemy, then you get to equip them in the overworld, and they'll give you special bonuses, like being able to heal anytime you talk to an NPC. And those bonuses start to really come in handy when you realize that all of your cooldowns for your words apply in between fights. So even if you got a really good combo off in one fight, if you go into your next fight with a bunch of stuff on cooldown, you're gonna start off having a bad time. And this is what gets me to the core of why I liked Wander Stars so much. My favorite thing in any RPG is management. I think the most important thing is the combat system, but to me, what really attracts me to an RPG is being able to have things to manage that actually matter and will apply to my entire playthrough. It's why I like job-based RPGs very often, is because usually with those kinds of games, they'll allow you to carry things over from one job to another, or from one character to another, and that's what allows me to micromanage every single one of my builds and make sure that they play in a way that I want them to. And then, of course, resource management. I think resource management is what makes a lot of RPGs actually fun. If the game gave you a free heal in between every fight, the fights themselves wouldn't matter all that much, would they? As with most things, there are obviously exceptions. I like the Xenoblade games, even though you heal between fights in those. But the point I'm trying to make about Wander Stars is that I will absolutely not complain that it does have resource management in it, because I think that's what makes RPGs great. Trying to get that perfect fight where you don't take any damage, or you finish it as quickly as possible, or you don't use that many words, it makes every fight a puzzle. And the answer to the puzzle changes depending on what you want. Do you want to finish the fight quickly? Do you want to befriend the enemy? Really, the only criticism I have of the gameplay so far is that since I didn't really lose any of my fights, I don't know what a lose condition looks like. And due to the structure of the game, which is episodic, it's kind of hard to explain, I worry that losing a fight will mean restarting an episode, which basically means having to redo every fight you already did over again, and that doesn't sound like any fun. In terms of all the ancillary stuff, like the music and the visuals, I thought the combat music was really good, but I really hope that there are different themes throughout the game, per episode maybe, because I don't really want to have a Dragon Quest XI situation where it is a good song, but it's the same song that plays throughout the entire thing. And the visuals are nice. It's obviously styled like an 80s anime, and I think that for the limited animation style, they did pretty well for themselves. I will take a million, billion stylized games before I ever want to take a realistic one, especially for RPGs. The only things left I really want to talk about were things like bugs and glitches, and I left them for last because, again, I wrote these things down back in April, so for all I know, they've been patched out of the game by now and aren't in the full release. The big persistent one for me was that the menus don't always display the correct info, and they're really just kind of laggy. I got a glitch where I was soft-locked from progressing the game. This is where I stopped my gameplay for the demo, because I had to remove an item from my inventory, but all my number values just kept rising, so I couldn't ever do anything. So I got stuck in the menu and I just had to close the game. Again, something I hope that they fixed by release, but no promises. And that's kind of it for my normal gaming. I could have talked about Symphony of the Night and Rondo of Blood, because I beat those on stream this last week, but I don't really know if I have much to say that I didn't already say on those streams. And even if I didn't make my full thoughts known on the stream, it would still probably just boil down to I think Castlevania is kind of bullshit and Symphony of the Night is really boring. Which isn't a surprise to anybody who knows me, because I don't like Metroidvanias, and this is the game that fucking named them. But on to the weekly topic, which is the Nintendo Direct. I mentioned it last week, but this week I'm actually getting to talk about it. to get the obvious out of the way, I find it very funny that Nintendo fans have found themselves in a pattern where they hear something cool in Direct, and they go to, like, get a pre-order on Nintendo's website, and they go, ooh, I don't know about this one. But then they buy it anyway, because they're, I don't know, whipped, I guess. I don't know why anyone would want to buy Galaxy 1 and 2 together when All-Stars came with Galaxy 1, and then you can just buy 2 individually. For the low cost of $40, mind you, but still. And I see a lot of people on Twitter.com tone policing anyone who, like, gets up in arms about people who are like, yeah, I'm gonna buy the Mario thing anyway. Because the problem that I think a lot of people have with people who go on Twitter and are like, ugh, I'm part of the problem, but I'm buying it anyway, is that you can't really do both, right? If you're gonna buy it anyway, then you don't think there is a problem, do you? If you thought there was a problem, why would you buy it? And this isn't me trying to do the society meme, because the whole thing with that meme is that you're allowed to criticize society while living in it, because you have to do that. You have to live in society, that's just a part of being a human. But you don't have to pay $70 for Mario Galaxy and Galaxy 2 on the Switch. In fact, you don't have to play those games on Switch at all. If you really want to play Mario Galaxy 1 and 2, getting a Wii and both copies of those games is pretty cheap. Not to mention, of course, the big E for emulation. But the point I'm trying to make is that if you really thought there was a problem, you have options for playing these games. You're not being forced into playing Galaxy 2 on the Switch. I think there is a problem, and so if I ever want to replay Galaxy 2, I will dust off my Wii U and get a copy of Galaxy 2 if I have to. So when these people go around asking, why is everyone so mad about how someone spends their money on a thing? It's because everyone knows you're a liar. If you think the price isn't that bad, or you just don't care, then say that. Say the price isn't that bad and I just don't care. Instead, these people feign sympathy by going, guys, yeah, there is a problem though, and then, you know, buying it. And not just buying it, but being shameless about buying it too. Because if you think you're part of the problem, you didn't have to, like, announce that to people. You know that, right? Were you really truly surprised when people got angry at you when you said that you were part of the problem? Were you really? If I didn't know any better, I would just assume that these people like being yelled at, but only a freak would be into that kind of perversion, so who knows what's going on in their head. I guess the thin silver lining is that now I have more stuff to look at on my Japan trip when I go to the Nintendo Museum. And now it's time for the individual game lightning round. The Super Mario Bros. Wonder stuff, the multiplayer games are cool, but it's kind of a shame they weren't in the game at launch. Like, every single new Soup game, on top of the fact that the Wii and Wii U new Soup games also came with the real multiplayer, and not just Ghost multiplayer, so they get even more points for that on top of the multiplayer modes. Yoshi looks really pretty, but from the description of the game given by the Direct, it kind of feels like they're making yet another one of Nintendo's IPs, like, open-ended for its most recent entry on the Switch, and that depresses me just a little bit, because it means the curse of Breath of the Wild is spreading. I thought it was very funny that they called Final Fantasy VII Remake the first game in the Remake trilogy, despite the fact that we know literally nothing about the third game yet. So I kind of feel bad for anyone who's picking up 7 Remake being like, oh, I can't wait to get into this trilogy, and it just doesn't exist, and won't exist for another like 3 years, if we're lucky. I absolutely love how Tears of the Kingdom had such an unfinished story that they shat the rest of it out onto a Musou game because they couldn't be fucked to make a real game the first time around. I cannot wait for the Breath of the Wild era to end. I want something new Zelda, just for once, please. And no, Echoes of Wisdom does not count, because everything I know about that game is Breath of the Wild light. Dragon Quest VII is a very exciting announcement, but it's hard to be too happy about it, because it feels like 1 step forward, 2 steps back. I believe that I've complained before about how Dragon Quest isn't available on modern consoles compared to every single mainline Final Fantasy, but the problem with the Dragon Quest games that they have released is that they're all way too overpriced. You can get all 14 mainline Final Fantasies, which includes 10-2 by the way, for $181 on Steam. For almost the exact same price at $179, you only get 5 Dragon Quest games, 1, 2, 3, 7, and 11. And somehow, 11's the cheapest game on that list despite being the most recent Dragon Quest game. So again, for the same price as 15 Final Fantasy games, because 10 and 10-2 come as a package deal, we're looking at only 5 Dragon Quest games, which, by ratio to series, is already pretty bad. Because that's 100% of mainline Final Fantasy, even if we throw the MMOs on top of there, but it's only 50% of Dragon Quest, even if we take the MMO out. Then, of course, pricing-wise, it's only more abysmal, because it's a third of the games. You get 5 games compared to 15. And the reason for this is why Dragon Quest VII is so bittersweet. It's because instead of doing pixel remasters, or ports like they did for Final Fantasy, they are wholesale remaking every single Dragon Quest game that they release on modern consoles. Of course, this is where the name remaster or remake is a little bit blurry, because the pixel remasters, despite being called remasters, are actually remakes of those games. But at the end of the day, they were still very faithful remakes, and Square priced them kind of appropriately. I think $80 for 6 centuries-old games is a little bit crazy, but for compared to Dragon Quest, it's downright ludicrous. If Square Enix eventually plans on getting the other Dragon Quest games onto modern consoles, I really think that they should just stick with the pixel remaster method. 4, 5, and 6, just give them remasters. Don't make them HD 2D remakes, partially because I think they kind of look ugly and are getting old now, but also just to save some damn money. If you could get Dream Drop Distance from the 3DS to the PS4, you can do the same thing with Dragon Quest VIII. But with Dragon Quest XII nebulously on the horizon, who knows what they're gonna do next. For the next announcement, I'm kind of stealing this from someone I saw on Twitter, but I didn't save the tweet when I saw it, and I can't find it anymore, so I'm just gonna repeat what they said, which was, the Virtual Boy thing is kind of embarrassing, because we've reached levels of nostalgia that are so extreme that people are getting excited for things that weren't even good. It's not even like, hey guys, aren't you so nostalgic for this thing you liked from your childhood? It's, hey, Gen Zers, I guess, are you nostalgic for this thing that you, A, probably have never played, and B, even if you had, you fucking hated? And it's just, like I said, embarrassing for a lot of people. Though at the same time, I probably shouldn't be surprised by this, because if Shadow Generations taught me anything, it's that people will always be ready to be nostalgic about things that were never good in the first place, like Shadow the Hedgehog 2005, or Sonic the Hedgehog 2006. The revisionist history is very strong with gamers. We don't know much about the open sandy area with the motorcycle from the Prime 4 trailer, but I don't think it's possible to sell me on a game less than by going open world Metroidvania, if of course that's what that is. I think the only way you could possibly sell me on it less is if you also said, we're adding roguelike elements to it. I already wasn't very interested in Bonanza. I think level design is kind of important, and that game doesn't really care about level design. But DLC, 2 months after release, that's very obviously cut content, and is just a roguelike minigame, it makes me roll my eyes. To think that Bonanza was almost the game that sold me on the Switch too. The Pokemon situation is bizarre to me, because we are finally getting Mega Evolutions for the starter Pokemon, and they're not in the game, at least not really. And then, of course, DLC practice has now advanced to pre-launch DLC, which is awesome, and sets a very cool standard. I will come back to a discussion about Danganronpa 2x2, because that one's a little bit longer, to end it with Fire Emblem, and it sucks that 3 Houses has been infected with the Breath of the Wild curse of making too much money to be let go. Do I partially think this because I don't like Breath of the Wild and I don't like 3 Houses? Yes, but at the same time, for 2 series that are known for having very different iterations from game to game, it kinda sucks that we've been stuck in the same era for so long in both of them, doesn't it? And now I want to cap it off with a discussion about Danganronpa 2x2. And I know that last week I talked about the fact that I'd be fine with Danganronpa ending because it ended. V3 was a very fine ending to the series, so I'm fine with not getting any more Danganronpa. But it turns out I lied, because more Danganronpa is very, very cool. The motion tweening is very uncanny, and probably my least favorite part about the whole announcement, but I think one of the more interesting things to talk about is the fact that I think 2 was the best candidate for getting a remake. The way I see it, 1's cast is designed very meticulously to allow for the story to be written how it is. Especially Kyoko, Byakuya, Chihiro, and Sakura. Then I think this applies to V3 in the same way, particularly Maki, Kaede, Rantaro, Anji, Himiko, Sumugi, and Kokichi. For example, I don't think I would much enjoy a version of Danganronpa 1 story where Chihiro survives for longer, because the way Chihiro is written is specifically for the purpose of dying early in the story. You keep Chihiro around for longer, and he just ends up kind of twiddling his thumbs, not doing anything. But part of the reason Danganronpa 2 suffers from being the weakest Danganronpa is due to the fact that its victims and killers are kind of interchangeable with the exception of Mikan and Nagito. I would say that Peko almost makes the cut, but she's kind of betrayed by the fact that Fuyuhiko's development goes nowhere after her death, so she ended up not really mattering. The same applies to who survives the games in the end too. 1's matter the most, for obvious reasons, and V3's are kinda weak, but 2's make the least sense by a very wide margin. They're not really characters that needed to be there in the ending, they're more just like the guys who didn't get killed. However, this ironically makes 2 the best candidate for getting a completely different story. The characters are so interchangeable that you could put them in completely different scenarios and still make a compelling and complete narrative with them. Assuming, of course, you can actually write well, but I have faith in Kodaka. I need not mention Hangman's Gambit 2.0, and Trials 2 and 3 being pretty famously weak among the series. But aside from Kibo's like V3 mechanics, I'd even say 2 has the weakest final trial. It's also nice to be making use of V3's vastly improved presentation, though it kinda sucks that it now makes Danganronpa 1 look like the odd one out for being kind of ugly in comparison. But all in all, I am very excited for Danganronpa 2x2. It's probably the most anticipated I've been for a game in a while. Even if it ends up bad, I guess I'll finally know how the V3 haters feel, even if they're wrong and stupid. So yeah, play Danganronpa now if you're interested, before you get spoiled, and that's it for me. Get out of here.